Do you know what day it is today? Today is the day that you will be introduced to the thoughts of the most influential and most controversial philosopher of the 20th and 21st century, Martin Heidegger. It is often said that when studying the works of Martin Heidegger, one plunges into the deepest depth of philosophical thought. For Heidegger's one and only philosophical commitment is towards the question of being. So today we plunge into the deep, and I'm well aware that it is much easier to dwell in shallow waters, in the shallow parts of the swimming pool. It is more comfortable there, warmer too, but everyone with children knows why it is warmer in those easier, shallow parts of the swimming pool. Today we ask the question of being, this vague and obscure question which has driven and haunted Western philosophy from its very beginnings, and according to many, is the cause of philosophy's dubious reputation as an unworldly, estranged endeavor. Let's face it, the world is on fire. Catastrophes are all around. Men beat up their wives. More and more often, fortunately, these wives strike back. Worldwide, people suffer from illness and disease, injustice, starvation and despair. And the philosopher poses the question, what is being? But not to worry. I will show you that the way Heidegger addresses this question is far from abstract and obscure. In fact, it will prove to be the most urgent, tangible, and concrete question of our lives. So pay close attention. The next 2 hours will be demanding but rewarding. Last night I tried out this class in front of the neighbor's dog, and he listened for 2 hours with pricked up ears. And he was a Cocker Spaniel, mind you.
Welcome back to First Philosophy. I'm Sonia Schwetz.
And I'm Kas Sonia.
And we have a big one today. As Awee has announced, we're moving to the big H.
Yeah, the big H, yeah.
After Husserl, we're going to another confusedly H philosopher, Heidegger. And the thing with Heidegger in this course is that he is maybe the most central figure in kind of Awee's framing of the course.
Absolutely.
And that brings me to a practical point that I would like to discuss and make explicit so that we're all clear about why the episodes are maybe a bit different.
Yeah.
Because Heidegger takes such a central part in the series of lectures, we will have not one, not two, not even three, but many, maybe 4 episodes on Heidegger. So this is a topic that we will start, but we're nowhere near ending it just in this episode.
And that's also why this episode will be a bit shorter, because it is very dense.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in. It's a lot of information.
And
we're going to get you through it. Don't worry.
It's this episode is not only special because Heidegger takes such a big place in Awee's course. Heidegger also takes a big place in Kas's mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is Heidegger was the first philosopher that I was taught in high school, where I really felt that I could connect with philosophy, and it was eventually the reason that I started studying philosophy. Mm-hmm. And as soon as Heidegger was taught in this course, I just took everything in, and I fell in love with the philosophy. I fell in love with reading and working with Heidegger. It's not a completely unproblematic relationship. Awee mentions in the very first sentence of this lecture that Heidegger is also one of the most controversial philosophers.
Yeah,
we will come to that.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
We will come to that big time. Awee mentions it throughout the lectures. So we're going to keep Awee's pace. We're not going to skip ahead. But it is not something that is controversial. However, for me, Heidegger still takes a very big place in my love and enjoyment of and for philosophy.
And I don't mean to be mean towards you, but I just couldn't help but see that, of course, Awee here also mentions that for him also the love affair with philosophy started with him being absolutely fascinated by Heidegger, and that of course made me think of you. And I was thinking, it's like, you know, you and then you like kind of you still focus on Heidegger, but then something else starts being added on top of it for Awee as well. And I was thinking, you know, it's kind of like boys and Heidegger. It's kind of like it goes on as like a phase, and then you can kind of like discover Levinas or something else, and then you like develop empathy. It's a bit like a philosopher's ayahuasca trip.
Yeah, and that is not something that I can really deny, because as you will see, Heidegger is both very thorough, very dense, but also Heidegger on the one hand shows what Awee was building towards in this series of lectures. Was really building towards this warm thinking and trying to really see someone in the full. Yeah. But Heidegger can also be very tough to get into, and also sometimes also very harsh. Yeah. And it will take a couple of lectures and also the lecture on Levinas to really expand on that. So this is for the far future. Yeah. But it is not something that I can deny, no.
Yeah. I think especially re-listening to this lecture has given me way more perspective than I had before listening to it on Heidegger. And that is something that's very interesting to me. And I was thinking that my one big wish that Kas, you and I hope we can do for the listeners is to show or hint at quite a wide variety of ways you can read Heidegger. Yeah. As we will discuss, you can read him in a way that is very charitable and progressive and open. And there is also a reading that is more nefarious that we will come to, of course.
Yeah. But to really give it space to breathe, because Heidegger really, it takes the time to get used to and it takes the time to begin. So for this episode, we're going to give Awee space to talk. Mm-hmm. We will be back at the end of the episode where we talk some of the points. But for now, I think we should just turn to Awee and let him introduce, as he says, the most influential and most controversial philosopher of the 20th and 21st century, Martin Heidegger.
Okay, see you at the debrief.
Today we will study and discuss the early works of Heidegger, more specifically his groundbreaking work, Being and Time, published in 1927. In the early 20s, Heidegger was Husserl's assistant. Husserl reckoned and fiercely hoped that Heidegger would continue the great project Husserl had given to the world, the quest for transcendental consciousness, transcendental subjectivity, constituting all real and possible worlds. And although Being in Time was dedicated to Husserl in friendship and admiration, in Freundschaft und Verehrung, Heidegger, much to Husserl's dismay, chose his own path within phenomenology. To illustrate, while attending as his assistant one of Husserl's classes on philosophy as a rigorous science, Heidegger wrote in his notebooks, "Philosophy a rigorous science? No! Philosophie eine strenge Wissenschaft? Nein! Philosophy is Anstrengung. Philosophy is to strenuously seize, to strenuously embrace your life and the world you live in. That is philosophy, so not rigorous science." According to Heidegger, Husserl's maxim "zu den Sachen selbst," so to the things themselves, to that what really matters, should not focus on transcendental consciousness, and not even on consciousness as such, but on being. So not on, if I use the German word, Bewusstsein, the German word for consciousness, Bewusstsein, but on Sein, being. This is a crucial intuition. Consciousness, so being conscious, is just one mode, one way of being. I can be conscious of intentional objects, but I can also be in love. I can be afraid, I can be aware, I can be indifferent, and even I can be unconscious. Philosophy should realize it's all about being, not about mental acts, not about acts. To be in love is not a mental act. It's not the intentional directedness to someone or something I love. Love involves our whole entire being. To on legetai polagos, Aristotle wrote. I quoted it in the first class. Being shows itself in many various ways. There is the being of the past, the being of the present, the being of the future. Some things are real, some things are possible, some things are ugly, some things are beautiful. There's so many ways that being shows itself. As argued in the first class, Aristotle drifted away, maybe he scared away from this crucial insight of the inherent plurality of being. Because Aristotle sought, like Plato, refuge in the stability of metaphysics. Aristotle by positing the unmoved mover. Titoon was the crucial question of Aristotle. What is being, or what does being mean? Titoon, and he answered it with another question. Tis he ousia. What is the substance? What is the foundation of everything there is? This is the movement of metaphysics. Heidegger, however, reminds us that philosophy is not the attempt to reach the saving rescue of the shore. Philosophy involves the courage and the ability to jump into the floating boat, the temporality of being. Now, the wonder of all wonders, which Husserl described as transcendental subjectivity, is, according to Heidegger, that beings are. Das Wunder aller Wunder, das Seiendes ist. Beings are. Now, at this crucial point, we are faced with the limits of the English language, which makes it very hard to clarify Heidegger's most basic and tantalizing thoughts. Let's look at one of Heidegger's greatest discoveries, intuitions, the so-called ontological difference. It sounds very difficult and technical what I'm going to do, but if you really pay close attention, you will notice that this intuition that Heidegger has is so evident, and it has been forgotten for so long. The ontological difference is the difference between beings and their being. In Dutch, zijnden and zijn. There is a difference between beings and their being. This curious piece of furniture is a being. It is solid, it has a certain contours, it has a fabric, it is a being. But it also happens, it also is at this moment as the place where I stand behind. This building is a construct, but it also happens at this moment, housing this meeting. That is the happening, the event of this building right now. So there is a difference between beings, objects, as they are, and the happening, the event of beings, which is always, this is always there with everything. There's always the ontological difference. You, me, everything is, and we also happen. That is the ontological difference. So Heidegger apparently tries to think being as the event of beings. Just write this down and chew on it for the rest of your life. Being is the event of beings. In Dutch, het gebeuren. In German, Ereignis. The happening, the event of beings. Being is not something, a being, which is in fact what Western philosophy has done ever since Plato and Aristotle. We were searching for a highest, ultimate being, something, the world of ideas, God, Hegel's absolute spirit, something, perhaps even Husserl's transcendental subjectivity. We're always looking for something that can be analyzed, defined, researched. But Heidegger reminds us that being is also, and maybe maybe primarily, a verb, not a noun. Het is een werkwoord, geen zelfstandige naamwoord. Being is a verb. This marks 24 centuries of forgetfulness of being as a verb. Western philosophy, from its very beginnings, official beginnings, maybe the pre-Socratic philosophers had some notion about being as a verb, but ever since Plato and Aristotle, every philosopher always has fallen into the trap that it made itself, we prepared it for ourselves, to consider being as a noun and as something, an object, or an ultimate object that can be analyzed. I also already said Heidegger is very difficult to translate. For some, this was a reason to call Heidegger a mystic of German language. And in fact, Heidegger doubted the philosophical capacities of most other languages. Heidegger's comment on the first translation of Being and Time, so the English translation of Being and Time, he said, every sentence is wrong. There's nothing right about this book, nothing. This is why, as Gene Stonebow, we have a rather good translation with some flaws, called it a translation of Being and Time. According to Heidegger, only Germans and Greek can do philosophy. And Dutch, of course, but we're just a German beach. So there's German and Greek, that are the languages of philosophy. There was this notorious remark of Heidegger, he once said, when the French begin to think, they speak German. Another reason why he's not that much loved. And if you look at the French language, you see there a problem. The French word for being is être. And the French word for a being is also être. So the French cannot even articulate the ontological difference because of their language. In English, the first English translation, they decided, well, how can we translate this problem of being and beings? Oh, the first translator said, let's write being with a capital B. That will help. But that would give the impression to the reader that being with a capital B is something, is really something. The English doesn't really do that quickly. So the whole crucial idea of being as a verb is clouded when you use this translation. This goes for many other idioms too. A very crucial one, the German word Wesen. In Dutch, we have the term Wesen as translation. But usually, we would translate Wesen by essence. Het wezen van de mens is the essence of man. Wesen is translated, so everywhere in the translation you see where it says wesentlich or im Wesen, it says essentially or in essence. But Wesen has a double meaning in German, as it has in Dutch. So we're not just a German beach, we have our own capacity. Wesen is another word for being. In Dutch we have the expression, dat kan wezen. That may be. So we still have this feeling for the ontological difference and for what is going on when we're talking about being and existence, or essence and existence. The word wezen has a double meaning. It's something about temporality, can be, and it is something about the essence of something. Now, Heidegger's broader depiction of being encourages a break with academic philosophy, which for ages has considered being as a noun, being as something that can be analyzed, understood, defined, etc. But being, according to Heidegger, is an event. The event which directly touches on our lives. We are being in the world, not egos, not subjects, not persons. We are being in the world. Mind you, we are not beings in the world. Then we would fall back again. Not beings in the world. We are being in the world. I'll come back to that. So I promised you at the beginning that I would show why Heidegger's question of being is far from abstract and obscure. Heidegger wants to retrieve the meaning of being as living our lives, instead of focusing on being as a stable but sterile concept. Heidegger's early lectures took place in the Kriegsnotsemester, so right after the war, 1919. Immediately after the war, they patched up the universities and rebuilt the philosophy departments. And in front of them were traumatized, wounded, often handicapped young men. And these handicapped, young, wounded, traumatized young men, and sometimes women, of course, couldn't care less about metaphysics and epistemology. They couldn't care less even about Husserl, who in 1913 published his famous Ideas on Phenomenology, where he brackets the world. He brackets the world. Can you imagine? There's mustard gas being dropped on you, and someone tells you you have to bracket the world. You can't bracket a bullet. This even goes for the question of Kant. What is man? What a nonsensical questions, these young people would say. What is man? What is man? That is us, here, crying and dying in the trenches. That is what is man? So Heidegger brought philosophy back to living life. Early influences, of course, Kierkegaard, who tirelessly explored individual existence, even to its extremes with his analysis of dread, of angst, and of possibility. Nietzsche, of course, was a great influence on early Heidegger, even more so on later Heidegger, with the dreadful experience of nihilism, embracing perspectivism, how to do this, but also Dostoevsky was of great influence on early Heidegger. Dostoevsky, in my opinion, the fifth master of suspicion, shows us the many faces of the subject, the polyphonic subject. Bakhtin, a great literature scientist, once called it, the polyphonic subject. We have to acknowledge the multidimensionality of human beings. There's one of Dostoevsky's most famous books, Crime and Punishment, deals with a young man, Raskolnikov, who kills an usurer, a loan shark, an old woman who he finds despicable, and the whole book, Crime and Punishment, is about his crime and about, well, I won't give a spoiler, but what happens afterwards with him and his thoughts. But it's also an exploration in his thoughts. Now, Nabokov, one of the founders of the anti-Dostoevsky Club, argued that Crime and Punishment is a very bad book. It's a terrible book. It's a failure, he says. It's a failure. Because if you count very well, you would see there's about 12 reasons why Raskolnikov killed the old woman. There's about 12 reasons. That is the strength of Dostoevsky. Because Raskolnikov kills the old woman because he wants to save his sister, who's about to marry a man with money but a terrible character. He kills the old woman because he's angry at the world. He kills the old woman because he thinks that evil people should be executed. He kills the old woman. If you read the whole book, you suddenly see, I am a Napoleon. I am above the law. I'm someone so special. I can kill whoever I want. That's me. That's me. But you can also find the reason why he kills the old lady is because he wants to see if he can do it. He wants to find out if he has the guts to do it. It's not easy to kill someone. And he wants to find out what will happen to him afterwards. So what Nabokov calls a bad trait in this novel and says this is not good literature is actually the very reason why this is so good literature. Because all thoughts are mixed thoughts, all feelings are mixed feelings, and all deeds are mixed deeds. So Dostoevsky shows us the polyphonic subject. This is a very great influence on Heidegger. You can't determine what is a subject. You can't ask what is man. You can't define Raskolnikov. You can't define him. Then there are the letters of Van Gogh. Heidegger really loved the letters of Van Gogh. He said they are more important. People, when they visited, even just before he died, someone visited him and he repeated it. All the secondary literature in philosophy is less important than the letters of Van Gogh. This is existential artistry. This is the art of existence that Van Gogh is writing about in his letters. Hannah Arendt, an early student of Heidegger and a lifelong companion, friend. They had their troubles too, but when Heidegger was 80 years old, she gave a lecture in which she said, with Heidegger, philosophy became a passion again. After so many ages, philosophy became a passion again, as it once was in early Plato. Heidegger doesn't speak about human beings, Hannah Arendt adds. He doesn't speak about human beings. He addresses human beings. He questions our being human. He asks what it means to be human. So he's not talking about human beings. He asks, what does it mean to be human? Max Scheler, another early phenomenologist, wrote in the 1920s, there has been no era in which so much has been written about man and mankind, but at the same time, no era failed to understand what is the meaning of being human. So we have to do some real questioning. There's these questions of Kant, what can I do? What can I know? What must I do? What may I hope? There's another question, a series of questions that T.S. Eliot articulates in The Wasteland, published in 1922, and it will be on the list that I am giving you to read for Christmas and long after that, The Wasteland. What shall I do? What shall I do? I shall rush out as I am and walk the streets with my hair down so. What shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do? The crisis of which Husserl spoke is not just a crisis in the sciences. It is everywhere. It is everywhere. We're all so busy. We're all so busy with our lives and all the tasks we put upon ourselves. But deep down, we're just passing time in hidden despair. Walking the streets with our hair down so. What shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do? So, being in time. Let's look at the text. This is the real thing. This is real philosophy. I'm not a Heideggerian, don't worry, but when I was young and I got this book in my hands, my life changed. This was a complete life changer as a young philosopher. Many people say this is one of the most difficult books to read. It's terrible to read. They skip it in horror and confusion. They just don't want to read it. But it's a very simple book, I assure you. It is a very simple book. You just have to find the right attitude to read it and find out how fascinating it is, what is happening. This already starts in the title, Being and Time. I I guess that most of you would say, well, that's just another title for a philosophical book. There's many titles to give to a book, so Being and Time is just another title. There's something very awkward. Until 1927, there was not a single book published in the entire history of Western philosophy with this title. Nobody ever thought about writing a book calling it Being and Time. Whereas you would say, well, being and time, that's the big things, you know? All about fishing or what is beauty. That's nice. But being and time. Nobody ever wrote a book under this title. If you go to a German university, you go to the library, and please do because it's great fun, you go to the S, and there you find Das Sein, and you find thousands of books. Das Sein. That is what philosophy is about. Das Sein, being as a noun, being. What is being? And then you get this whole book about all the aspects and dimensions of being. But Heidegger notices, finally, first time, 24 centuries of obliviousness of being. Says, no, being and time belong together. Being is not a noun, being is a verb. From the perspective of metaphysics, nobody would ever think of writing such a book because the metaphysics is thinking against time. Because metaphysics wants eternal truth. Being without time, that would have been the title of all these books, Being Without Time. That's what all the metaphysics and all these scrutinous philosophers for many, many ages and ages have sought for. Being and time, they belong together. So the title is as such fascinating enough to invite the reader to really make the effort. But then we find the content, and we find very difficult sentences, and even more, very difficult words. Heidegger is one of the inventors of what we call neologisms. So words that are not used in common language, but which he made up and which confuse and irritate many of his readers. He doesn't speak of subjects or persons. He speaks of being in the world with little stripes between it. He speaks of being towards death. He speaks of the worlding of world or the worldliness of world. Idioms that are actually not even correct German grammar. But this is the whole point. Heidegger says, in Being and Time, die Grammatik fehlt. Grammar fails. Because the grammar we use is the grammar of metaphysics. Our whole culture is focused on the attitude of metaphysics, where we want to pinpoint the world, instead of accepting its fluidity, accepting its temporality. Being is not a noun, it's not stable, it's not eternal. We have to change the language to find an adequate idiom for what I'm thinking. And after Heidegger, many, many philosophers, Foucault, Sartre, and Merleau-Ponty, followed him in exploring different words, different grammars, even different grammars, to articulate what is really going on.
So, we have reached the end of the lecture that, as we said, as we promised, was quite dense.
Yeah.
And now we're here on the shore, we're going to debrief. We're going to try to make sure that things fall into place a bit easier, try to provide any context that maybe you thought was missing. And what's good to talk about is, of course, the central concept of the lecture, being, and how Awee emphasizes the importance of understanding being as a verb and not a noun.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for people who have studied philosophy or people who know their Heidegger, this can almost seem as an arbitrary point.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, of course, Heidegger talks about being as a verb and not a noun.
Yeah.
But the entire history of philosophy, Western philosophy, talks about being as a noun in such a specific and almost rigid way really looking for the essence of being and what a being is, never even questioning the verb, which Heidegger does. And I think the importance of this and also the insight in this cannot really be overstated, but it's also something to really recognize, maybe even to like, do not take for granted that this just happened. Like, this comes after 2,000 years of a history of Western philosophy.
I know, and it's always it's difficult to grasp just how important it is, because indeed it starts seeming so obvious and matter of fact. But yeah, for whatever reason, it did take 2,000 years.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons, and this is a bit biographical about Heidegger, but he started teaching just after the First World War. And a lot of the young people in university were completely disillusioned by the world. Like they were completely, why are we talking about medieval philosophy? Like, we were just shot. We like, our friends were killed on the battlefield. Like, what are we talking about? And there is this beautiful, beautiful speech by Hannah Arendt, who talks about Heidegger, that he really brought back the joy and the importance of philosophy in his lectures. And that is also, I think, what he is doing with this. Like, we're not doing this looking for being, but being is a verb. We use being all the time, yet we do not know what it is.
Yeah.
It is raining, but what is?
We'll kind of get to the question of how indeterminate being is at the later episode.
Yeah.
So maybe this is enough of sort of expanding in that direction.
No, and please cut me off, because I can.
No, of course.
I can go on.
Talking about language
and
grammar, Awee makes quite a big point about the new grammar being invented and the new words being used. And I think it's very important and maybe interesting, if you're just being introduced to philosophy, to kind of ruminate just a little bit on how significant it is and why new grammar and new words would have to be invented at all.
Yes.
Because well, it's a very sort of, I would say there is a certain consensus about it by this point in Western philosophy, that sort of our world, our lived world, and our thinking is, of course, only as wide as the language, because language for us is the ultimate mediator. If you want to be, kind of go really far towards Lacan, he would just say that everything just a signifier, everything is just a language. This is the only kind of thing, our only way of relating to the world.
Yeah.
And even if you don't go as far, I think it's pretty uncontroversial to recognize just how important it is. And that is, I think, that is why it's so significant that Heidegger invents new grammar and new language, because it presupposes that through this invention, he paves the way of talking about something that previously we could not talk about, and therefore we could not even imagine possibly the existence of something, because you don't have the language for it.
And in that sense, he is trying to do something similar to Husserl. So Heidegger is trying to really give the framework of our experience.
Yeah.
So he's not trying to fill it in, but he's giving the framework for our experience. And that is, he is using new words, because you could argue that he could just as well use some of the old words, because you could explain some of his phrases in language that was already accessible at the time. But he would argue that these phrases or these words have too many associations with them.
Yeah.
So if you talk about humans, you immediately have presuppositions about what that would mean and what that would entail. And when Heidegger talks about this, he uses Dasein just to really talk about that there's something different from a phenomenological perspective.
Yeah. There's more I in talking about language, because I really feel like, besides the conceptual points that have been discussed, it's, once again, I think it's quite interesting to continue talking in this vein, because you and I, when we were discussing this episode, we were also thought about, and I think maybe attentive listeners might have noticed this interesting thing that Awee relays about Heidegger, that he thought that true philosophy can only be done in Greek and in German.
Yeah.
And, well, in Dutch, because it's kind of German.
But that's an Aweeism. Like Awee adds the Dutch.
Yeah, of course. Awee adds the Dutch. So yeah, sure. But, you can see here that language is so important that something a bit, and to me, something a bit worrisome starts being added to it. It can be only Greek and it can be only German.
Yeah, and it is strange that some of the biggest influences on Heidegger, so for example, Kierkegaard and also Dostoevsky, didn't speak German or Greek.
Yeah.
And there is definitely a flavor of nationalism coming through here. And there is one thing that you can defend this in one specific way, and that is that for him, the things that he really wants to express, he expresses in German.
Sure.
And also the play, he really makes a lot of play on words and neologisms, and those are very language specific. That's also, if you read Heidegger in English, it is really more difficult to grasp than if you have the German words that he specifically uses in some parts available to you.
Of course, but I still think this explanation is a little bit like missing the fact, okay, look, shocker, Emin is more comfortable in his native tongue.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No. Yeah. No, like if you would just make the argument, hey, what I am doing is very language sensitive, so I would really prefer it if we kept it German.
Yeah.
That would be less harsh than saying, oh, by the way, all the French and all the Americans and all, they can't think.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, that is going too far. Definitely. It's a very strange point. One thing that is very particular to Heidegger is that it's not even the specific like German in general for him, but he has also a very specific focus on dialect. Naturally, his own. He's from Meskirch, so everything around that area, that's very good. But he has a focus on dialect because he thinks, and this is in a different work than is being discussed in this lecture, but he argues that people who express something in a dialect has a more direct relation to what they're trying to express.
Yeah.
This gives definitely a very, very prominent place to language in his philosophy. And I also really think he writes this in the letter on humanism. I think he writes that we live in the house of language.
Yeah. But talking about language is like German is great. German rocks.
And also
he also said Greek rocks.
Greek rocks. Yeah.
What about, you mentioned something about Germany being Greek pilled at the time?
Yeah. So there is a strange relation between Germany in the 19th and 20th century and Greece.
You don't say.
Ancient Greece, in which I believe that, this might be going too far into detail, but I believe the story is that in like the French and the Italian people could always claim that they were basically descendants of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And Germany didn't have that because they have the Germanic language.
Yes.
So they just denounced that entire Latin history and just said, oh, basically we're Greek.
That's so funny.
But with finding the first Indo-European languages or roots of languages, because none of these languages exist, but the roots exist. There's no written language that we can fall back on, but there are some roots that we can find. It is not completely nonsensical. There are relations between.
That's what they want you to think.
That's what they wanted. Yeah. No, but there was definitely Germany was very obsessed with ancient Greece and ancient Greek philosophy and art and culture. This also really showed in academia. So if you want to look for Greek scholars, if you wanted to look for academic discourse about ancient Greek philosophy, Germany really was the place to be.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a strange thing in Heidegger that it were the old Greeks and it's the Germans, but there is of course the specific interpretation of the history of Western philosophy that starts with Greece, not necessarily right, but the story is there.
Yeah.
And the obsession with Greece was very, very predominant at the time. So it might seem a bit random, but it is not that random.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this obsession persists, so I don't think it's random at all. I think we see it a lot.
Yeah.
Pretty much everywhere. But, okay, I mean, clearly there's a lot to talk about, and we could go on, but especially considering how dense it has been so far, and just how dense the next episode is going to be, I think it's good for us to kind of round this up.
Yeah.
Encourage you, dear listeners, to re-listen to this episode if you will feel like you need to before the next one, because the next episode we are going to be reading directly from Being in Time.
Yeah. And specifically there, the language thing will show itself.
Lots of language things.
Lots of language things.
And until then, we will stay silent.